Very much, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to talk about NextGen Security and whether it's worth the risk. Now, I must apologise, it's a little bit of artistic license I've taken there. It's less, is it worth the risk, but will it meet your risk mitigation requirements? Will next generation security mitigate the risks that your organisation is facing? But before we get into that, a little bit more light-hearted. Any boxing fans in the audience? Okay, yeah, a few hands. Just recently, if you're not a boxing fan, it's still an interesting story and it's got some parallels to what we're going to be talking about today. Just on the 22nd of February, 3 weeks ago, the British boxer in the white and gold trunks there standing defeated the current heavyweight champion. And it's not really the fight that's of interest to me, but what was interesting was that Tyson Fury, who's the chap who's standing there, 2 months before the big fight, changed his trainer. So he changed from his lifelong trainer, as it were, to somebody new. And after he was successful and defeated the chap who'd been the heavyweight champion for 5 years, so a massive upset. After the win, he attributed that change in trainer and the secrets that new trainer gave him to his success. So my question there, what was the secret to Tyson Fury's success? I'll do the big reveal at the end of the presentation to maintain your interest. But it's got some parallels to what we're going to be talking about. So by way of introduction, my name's Andy Green. I've been working in cybersecurity, as we mentioned, for close to 20 years. I'm the CISO at an organisation called Gemserv. Now Gemserv are, we've obviously got a stand here, we're on stand number 4 outside in the auditorium, and I'd welcome any of you to come over and talk to us about what we do. I've been the CISO there since 2018, and so I provide the internal organisation with the head of security capability, so I advise us on how to mitigate risks and whether the use of NextGen Security is appropriate for our business. But also, when the time permitting, I also lead with some of our clients as a managing consultant, so I get involved in providing security for clients from government, energy, defence and commercial sector. So I've got a short presentation, just 10 slides, where I'm going to provide you with some insights that I've seen from the front line in terms of next-gen security and whether or not it's the right strategy and the right approach to mitigating the risks that we face. And what I'm going to try and do is to bring that to life with some of the insights that I've seen and provide you with some actionable information that you can take back to your own organisations. This slide, my apologies, it's a bit drab. It was changed at the last minute by our marketing team to take out all the actual faces that I had for all of these members of our team. But what I'm trying to show here is really the breadth of Gemserv's experience. And so this is the only slide I'm going to show advertising essentially what we do. But we have over 50 consultants who are cybersecurity specialists. And those specialists range from architecture, business continuity, right the way through via risk to compliance, and then some more specialised area. And we have experts and specialists in both fundamental security, so we have a whole team that focuses on industrial IoT and operational technology. And for example, we have within our industrial security team a chap who's doing a PhD in industrial control systems. So he's looking very much at the security of systems which may have been in place in legacy for up to 20 years. Equally, we have very much a team that focuses on next-gen security. So again, we have a PhD who is one of our practice leads who has a PhD in artificial intelligence. So we can give you a breadth of experience right across the security space. So please do come speak to us if you've got any security requirements. So, why the need for next-gen security? Well, I think we're all aware that security threats are evolving, and I thought that I would just give some insight into some of the client challenges that I've seen over the last 12 months. And I've distilled that down into 4 key areas, if you will. So the first one is around ransomware. Now, I'm sure everybody's aware of the impact of ransomware and the fact that it exists. But what I've seen over the last 12 months, specifically in clients that I've been in the government, in the legal sector, and in non-for-profit, I've seen ransomware and the threat from ransomware increase. Not only that, but we've seen that the ransoms that are being asked for, or demanded, perhaps is a better way of putting it, are increasing. So a few years ago, the ransoms were relatively low in their financial number. Now we're seeing that those, in some cases, going through the roof. And I think perhaps that's a product of the fact that the criminals are becoming emboldened by their success with regards to ransomware. And so they're in some cases asking for six-figure ransoms to get the data back. And worryingly, we're also seeing that ransomware is targeting the backups of organizations. So where sort of the last line of defense was often that the organization had regular backups, in the event of ransomware taking down their production systems, they could revert to a backup to avoid paying the ransom. Criminals obviously are, it's an arms race, and so they're now targeting with malware, ransomware which is targeting the backup. So when the client falls back to the backup to restore, that is also infected with ransomware. So they're left with very little options but to pay the ransom. The second area that we're seeing is the increased attack surface that a lot of organizations are facing, if you will. So this goes right from enterprise-grade clients right down to sort of small boutique clients. The largest area there is the use of shadow IT, where organizations, teams such as marketing, for example, or those who are looking at the customer-facing front end are buying cloud-based services themselves without the input of the IT departments. That obviously then means that it isn't going through the due diligence and potentially the security controls that the IT team would seek to insist on when buying a new service. And consequently then the attack surface is much greater, and often those are areas that threats are exploiting. We're obviously seeing a lot of organizations move towards cloud computing, and so we see threats there where the organization isn't fully aware of their responsibilities under the shared responsibility model. So cloud computing, a lot of people assume that the cloud provider provides all of the security. And in the case of software as a service, that's quite often the case. But where you're looking at platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, a significant proportion of the security obligations still reside with you as a customer. So if that isn't factored into the strategy and the design of the cloud service, quite often we're seeing S3 buckets, for example, which are exposed to internet-borne threats. And lastly, bring your own device, which is obviously something which has been around for a while, but we're still seeing organizations struggling with users who expect the same level of service from their personal devices as their corporate provided devices, or indeed to have their own devices on the corporate estate. Unsurprisingly, phishing is still a threat which is evolving and proving challenging for our clients. A light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, is that we see that awareness of phishing threats is on the increase, and users within organizations are less susceptible to phishing threats in the round and on the whole. But unfortunately, the phishers are becoming more sophisticated, and they're targeting users with phishing emails which are more personalized. And so that means that those more personalized phishing emails are having a higher success rate than the more generic all-person phishers that were previously being sent to all users, for example, within an organization. We're also seeing that the phishing emails are more financially motivated, so we're seeing more fraud which is originating from phishing. And as a consequence then, the phishing styles and the attacks which are being used are changing slightly. So we're seeing more bogus invoices, for example. We're seeing more email addresses which are originating where an organization has fall foul of a phishing email, and then phishers are being sent from legitimate emails within that company to their client companies requesting payments, for example, which is proving very difficult for users to spot and to defend against. And then lastly there, third-party and supply chain attacks are increasing. So we're seeing our clients being targeted by their supply chain, which often have direct connections in, so they're considered to be insider attacks effectively, because those clients are within the organization's perimeter or their boundary, and certainly within their trust. And also, perhaps more insidiously, we're seeing that following, for example, phishing attacks, that criminals are targeting organizations to then use them as a jumping off attack, so island hopping attacks or watering hole attacks to target their supply chain, either upstream or downstream members of their supply chain, which obviously then has a significant impact on their reputation and their standing with their supply chain. So significant amount of challenges, and I think with an audience that's presumably predominantly made up of CISOs and security leads, I'm sure that there's no surprises there. The question really, and the point of this presentation is, how do we address those? Do we use next-gen technology, or should we be focusing on the fundamentals? And it's my contention that although next-gen technologies have a place to play in this equation, we should be focusing on the fundamental aspects of security first and getting those right. Now, we do have a significant amount of next-gen security deployed within our clients, and that we're advising them and consulting with them on. So a few examples there over the last 12 months. We've deployed at a large government organisation a zero trust architecture. So that's reducing their trust perimeter from the network, if you like, and the perimeter around the network to the endpoint. And we then use the government network as a completely untrusted infrastructure, the same way as if they were working in a coffee shop. All of the security controls are then down to the identity of the user, the endpoint, and the policy-based decisions at the zero trust architecture, which then proxies those connections out to the cloud services. So that government department, for example, are kind of trailblazing the way for cloud first within the government space. And actually the architecture has proven itself at the moment with the business continuity challenges that we're having with the coronavirus, in so much that that department, because of they've got a zero trust architecture and all of the security resides to a great degree on the endpoint as opposed to the network, now that they're having to discuss all of their users working remotely, all of the security is already baked into their architecture. We've also worked with an organisation to focus on policy-based segmentation, and this came out of a challenge that the organisation had about connecting their operational technology. So the operation, or what I mean by that is the technology that runs their heavy industrial plants, to their IT networks to get productivity gains. So not an unusual situation, but we're seeing increasingly that where operational technology was air-gapped previously, now it's being connected either because they're putting Internet of Things devices, industrial Internet of Things connected devices directly connected to the Internet, or they're connecting it to the IT network as a punch-out point through to the Internet. And that then facilitates remote access from their vendors, for example, whether that be Siemens or some of the large industrial control system providers. But what that means is that they need to have much greater segmentation to provide adequate controls, or that's certainly one way of mitigating the risk. And so we put in quite a next-gen technology solution there, which is based on policy-based, where previously the segmentation was very much at the network layer, where they had VLANs and firewalls providing the security at that layer. This is much more at an application layer and micro-segmentation, which is proved to be not only more effective, well, not necessarily more effective, but more efficient in terms of the deployment times, and also gives much greater visibility into the segmentation. We've recently done a project to deploy a new, or a relatively new, suite of technologies, if you like. So breach and, sorry, my apologies, that says attach, it should say attack simulation solutions. And so that's a capability which was relatively new to us, and it's quite an embryonic area of cybersecurity. What this type of technology seeks to do is to replicate red teaming exercises, or automate IT health checks, or pen testing, if you will. So you might ask, well, how does that differ from an automated vulnerability assessment? The difference is that a vulnerability assessment as an automated assurance activity will seek to look for open ports, open services, for example, see whether or not there are vulnerabilities associated with those services that are running, and report back that you have an exposure there. What the breach and attack simulation tools are doing is looking to see whether or not you can, for example, exfiltrate data out of an organisation in the same way that a pen tester might, or to see whether or not you can download virus definitions, so sample virus definitions, to see whether your automated malware tools would recognise those and stop them. So it's kind of it's a midway point, if you like, between vulnerability assessment and red teaming exercises. And that's proven to be quite a novel and interesting approach, whereby we had an organisation that had pen testing, had vulnerability assessments, and other forms of assurance, and when we ran breach and attack simulation tool sets, a whole new area of vulnerabilities were exposed. The other key point there is identifying lateral movement, so that the the organisation will identify a vulnerable machine and then seek to move within the network across it. And then lastly, we've worked with endpoint detection and response solutions to tighten up on those. And my question is really, are these advanced technologies the best approach to mitigating the risks? And I think the key is that we need to start with risk assessments. So in our research, less than 43% of organisations were doing regular risk assessments. The key point here is that by undertaking risk, you understand what the threats that you're facing are. And once you understand the threats and the likely techniques that they're going to be using, are they sophisticated, and do you need these sort of next-gen technologies to address those, or are they relatively unsophisticated and consequently basic technologies such as, not technologies but frameworks, such as the Cyber Essentials scheme or the CIS critical controls may be a better approach to get your foundation in place before focusing on the next-gen technologies. The key point around these best practices, the Cyber Essentials scheme, which everybody will know is a UK-based government-led scheme, and the Cyber Essentials, which is US but is made up of over 100 organisations globally contributing, is that they follow the approach of offence informs defence. So what both of these have done is to look at what are the attacks that are facing our community. So in Cyber Essentials case, government and defence, UK government and defence. Cyber Essentials, a global set of blue chip organisations, if you will. And then have a look what's targeting us and what controls would stop those attacks. And so in Cyber Essentials case, there's 5 areas. In the SIS controls, then there's 20 key areas. And by focusing on those fundamental foundational controls first, before the next-gen technologies, I think that we get to a better outcome. Now, mindful that we're short on time, this slide was just that it's not all about technology. In our experience, we see that about 80% of organisations' budgets are spent on technical protective controls, missing out a lot of the detection, the response, and the people in the process areas. And we're seeing that the people aspect is a significant area of concern. So I'd stress to you to focus on the people as well as the technology. And so in summary, the threats are increasing. I think we're all aware of that. The solution is to look at risk and determine where your risks are, who are the threats that are targeting you, and as a consequence then determine whether foundational controls would be, you'd get more bang for your buck than next-gen technologies. But next-gen technologies have their place to play. If you are looking at the foundations, look at Cyber Essentials or the critical controls. And don't forget the human side and the policy side. And then lastly, the point around the boxing was that his new trainer, Sugar Hill Stewart, took him back to basics. So he attributed his success to the fact that his trainer, instead of coming up with some elaborate strategy to defeat the current heavyweight champion of the world, he took him back to the fundamentals, schooled him on the basics, made him focus on the basics, and that was the cause of his success. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. I think we might have time for just one quick question.
1 minute.
One quick 1 minute question. Any questions?
Nope. You're around for the rest of today?
I am indeed. I'll be around.
We've got the stand outside.
We're on stand number 4, so please do pop over. It'd be great to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
That's brilliant.